Well, hey everybody. Welcome to another episode of Always Good News. So glad that you've joined us, and I hope that this conversation encourages you and inspires you and even challenges you. So good to have everybody jumping on. Welcome Kelly, welcome Jane. So good to see everybody. Hey, if this is the first time you've ever joined us, welcome. We're really excited that you're here, and I know there's lots that you could be doing right now. You could be looking at funny cat videos, or you could be playing online games, but you're here, and I think it's for a reason. I think this conversation is going to be really inspiring, and this is a powerful story that we're going to hear tonight. So welcome. Hey, do me a favor as you're jumping on, let me know where you're watching from. So in the comment box below where it says add a comment, let me know where you are in the world. We always are so excited to have people from not only all across this great country of Canada, but all around the world. Last week we had some people from Honduras and Brazil and the United States of America. So good to have everybody jumping on. Don't be shy. Let us know right in the comment box where you're watching from. Hi, Paula. Good to have you joining from Canada. Hey, let us know if you want to let us know what city or province or country. It's always fun to know where our viewers are. And hey, if you're watching on YouTube, click subscribe so we know we can keep in touch, and you can keep updated with all the latest content that's coming out on our YouTube channel. So welcome, everybody. So good to have you. We are going to jump in. I'm going to add my guest so we can jump in because, man, you are going to hear a powerful story tonight. And listen, before we do, let me just say this. I know that this has been a challenging year and some months that we've been living in around the globe, and there's a lot of people that are struggling, and it's a heavy time, and it's a discouraging time for a lot of people. And I just want to remind you why we're here and what you're going to hear watching tonight. You're going to hear things that will encourage you, that in spite of challenges and tough circumstances, and we know that life can be very hard, but we want to remind you tonight that God is good and God is for you. He's not against you. And so I don't know what your situation is tonight, but you're here, you're watching, and I really believe that this is going to be an encouragement to you tonight. So without further ado, let me go and add our guest for tonight. You're gonna love him. Sarah, good to see you. Gary, Hilda, always good to have you guys. There he is, the man.
Okay.
It's working.
Hello.
There's always that bated breath. Is this technology going to work, right?
Yeah, well, and I have to admit, Instagram, as I said to you earlier, is pretty much the only video that I'm not used to.
Perfect. Well, I'm glad I'm stretching you and getting you into something new. So good to have you. Jonathan Lewis, welcome.
Yeah.
Lennon Anderson, good to see you. Barbara, welcome. Good to have all of you joining tonight. Jonathan, so good to have you, man. And I know that right now everybody's spending a lot of time on Zoom calls, and so I appreciate the extra sacrifice of taking some time from your family tonight to be with us. But I want people to hear from you. I want them to hear what God's done in your life and your story, and it's going to be awesome. Let me introduce, because a lot of people might be watching that don't know you. For everybody that's watching, Jonathan is the president of Eastport Financial Group. He's also the author of Deep Water, which is a book on facing the giant of fatherlessness for men. Jonathan's married to Sarah. He's got two beautiful daughters. They live about an hour outside of the capital city of Halifax in a community called Hebbville. And that's a little snapshot of who you are, Jonathan, but we have a little fun here so people know a little bit of the side that they might not hear around the boardroom table or on your biography. This is called This or That. I'm going to throw two things at you, and you got to tell us which one you pick. You ready for this? Here we go. Talk or text?
Okay, Mark, bring it on.
Talk or text?
Text.
All right. Tent or hotel?
Tent.
Uh-huh. Cheesecake or pie?
Apple pie.
Apple pie. Winter tires or all seasons?
All seasons, man. Otherwise, you got no business being on the road.
All right. Speaking of the road, slow lane or passing lane?
Oh, passing lane. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't. If you know Jonathan at all, there is no debating there.
Yeah.
Passing lane. So good to have you, bro. We are going to jump in. and I
Sure.
don't want to take a lot of time. I want to give it to you. I want people to hear a little bit about your story, and then we'll unpack some different aspects of it. We're going to talk about a bunch of things, but I'd love to hear, first of all, you share your story that'll help frame the rest of this conversation. So give us a story of Jonathan Lewis.
Sure, man. I was listening to some JD Greer while I was running tonight, and he said something that really hit home for me, and I'll bring it back to my story. But he said, with COVID-19, the last 12 months, you're either a hunk, a monk, a chunk, or a drunk. And it dawned on me, I'm two of those four. I've definitely put on some chunk, and I think I've become a bit of a monk. And that I would say that this past year has been the most formative year for me as a believer in my entire life, where I've had tremendous time to get into God's word and really understand who we are in him.
Yeah.
And that he's actually the main character of the story.
Yeah.
And we're just here to glorify him. So with that, my backstory, as you know, Mark, it's crazy, but Mark and I went to high school together, but we probably didn't know each other that well in high school. And that's because I was going through some very difficult times when most kids were just living large. And those difficult times were heading into high school. I watched my dad drown, and I didn't just watch him drown. I actually almost drowned trying to save him. And had to live with not only the loss of my dad, but also the self-blaming and guilt and regret that came with being in the water with him and failing to get him to safety and ultimately revive him.
How old were you, Jonathan, when this happened?
It was just after my 15th birthday. Yeah,
Wow.
We were out in a little place not far from Halifax called Sandy Cove. A lot of people would know it, in Terrence Bay. I even built a house there and lived there for a number of years just to be close to that spot. And I used to go down there a lot to pray, even though at the time I wasn't serving the Lord. I was, I think, like Jacob, wrestling.
Yep.
Really wrestling with God and where he was, and didn't have the spiritual maturity to understand that the rain falls on the just and the unjust alike, and that, you know, God can take anything and turn it for good. And I think about Job chapter 38 onwards, where Job has spent 37 chapters wrestling with God, with some friends, although well-meaning, and a wife that was chirping in his ear. Really had to get to a place where he had to go one-on-one with God, and I think God really put him in his place and said, Job, where were you when I formed the heavens and the stars? Like, you don't even understand the basics, and you're questioning me, right? And I think all of us wrestle with God.
Yep.
I don't even think it's bad to doubt God. I think the fact is, if you're doubting, you've got your foot raised, and the question is, are you going to lean back or lean in?
Yeah,
but you got to have your foot raised one way or the other if you're going to lean in. And so I think for me, what I've discovered in 20 years of what I would say walking in the wilderness from the age of 15 to the age of 34, I was searching, and I was very much not agnostic. There would have been no signs of any fruit of God manifesting or working in my life, but he was wrestling with the fatherless. You mentioned in an email thread Psalm 68, which I do talk about in my book, and him being a father to the fatherless. And there's just no doubt about it, looking back on it. At one point, I had a real hate on for the church and a hate on for Christians, which is natural because, frankly, I was blaming God for the atrocities or the hardships that my family faced having lost my dad. And,
of course. And
you know, when I look at it now, I can literally name an ensuite of men that God sent into my life, some of them whom you know, like Bruce Havel or Charlie Passy, and some you wouldn't know. But there was one consistency with every one of these men, and it was that they were a man who had a heart to serve God. Some of them could actually relate to the circumstances I found myself in. But
Yeah.
one thing's for sure, they all pointed me to Christ, even though I was running away from him.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a formative time in my life where I didn't have a lot of the peace and contentment that a lot of kids grow up with. I
Yeah.
had a lot of hardships. I worked full time in high school to make ends meet, and I did a lot of couch surfing.
Yeah. Man, you said a couple of powerful things I just want to highlight there, Jonathan. First of all, doubting and wrestling with the tough stuff in life, I think is good. I think it's healthy.
Yeah,
I think it's
yeah,
necessary to really own what this is all about. And it reminds me, you said the whole doubt piece, when we think of the narrative of Jesus, throughout the Gospels, and we read as he's getting ready to die a horrific death, and he knew what was coming. And even he wrestled with his father in that moment and said, like, isn't there a plan B? Of course,
yeah,
paraphrasing now, but saying, isn't there another way we could go through with this? But ultimately going through with it. And I think the power of the gospel is that Jesus really went through, the more you dive into scripture, he went through horrific things and real things that you and I and all of us have different stories, but stories nonetheless. And
yeah,
so he's a savior that's familiar, with the stuff that we've gone through, and he's paid
yeah.
the ultimate price for us. Tell us, Jonathan, so you're 15, you experienced not only the loss of your dad, but a horrific accident, really, where you were right there. I think you started to run a bit. You talked about that. What did life
Yeah, I
look
mean,
like for you finishing high school? And
yeah, like it's funny. I think people in high school would have characterized me as a gregarious, outgoing guy, but somehow was mysteriously withdrawn.
yeah,
And to be honest, there's a lot of that even today. It's those are such formative years, and I finally remember saying to my mom, "Look, I just don't seem to be able to get any traction here, and I'm going to hop on my motorcycle and head west." And fast forward, I found myself living in a tent in the Rocky Mountains. I'd been up there for 5 or 6 months with a pit stop on the way to visit another mutual friend you and I have, John McKay, who
right.
to this day is still one of my closest friends. And, I drove 9 hours north into the Rocky Mountains and got a job working in a tree planting shop or rig. And I can remember being up in the mountains hundreds of kilometers from the nearest town and probably 7 or 8 kilometers from another human being that I was aware of. And I can remember sitting up on those mountains one night, just waving my fist at heaven and said, I don't know if you're real or not, but if you are, I just really want you to leave me alone. I just want to do my own thing. And it was such an act of rebellion, but I was so hurt. I was really, really hurting. And this is 4 years after my dad died. I'm done high school, and I just couldn't figure out the big questions in life.
Yeah.
And no one seemed to be able to tell me. And to be honest, people tried, but boy, I was angry. I was really angry at the world and angry at circumstances. And,
Yeah.
I look back on it, and, there's one thing I'm certain of today: our worst moments, our worst trials, God can use those for our greatest victories. And it's always going to be to point people to him, to glorify him. And, when I look at it now, my greatest tragedy, losing my dad, I can actually say with conviction, there's no way I would change a thing. I would give anything to have a few minutes to talk to my dad again.
Yeah.
What so many people take for granted. But I wouldn't change it, because I've really had such a heart for injustice and people that are hurting, people that have suffered loss, people that are suffering loss.
Yeah.
God's given me a tremendously sensitive heart to that, because I know how deep that pain can be.
Yeah.
And I know that it's a time in a person's life when you can really point them to Christ, when you can really point them to their Savior. And, I had a friend of mine say to me once, I was ranting and venting, and I said, I just don't understand. I don't understand how anybody could relate to the pain and the anguish that I'm dealing with. And this was over a different circumstance in my life. And I'll never forget this girlfriend of mine. She said, well, there's one person who you need to talk to, actually, a really good friend of mine that can relate to what you're going through, Jonathan. And I said, who? Like, honestly, give me the guy's cell number.
Yeah.
I'll text him right now. And she said, well, that's Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And it was really powerful. It stopped me dead in my tracks this was 10 years ago when I really, I would say, depending on your theology, either got saved or Jesus started to finish what he started in me as a youth. But that was a real pivotal conversation. I was literally on my cell phone behind my office, just beyond myself with frustration. And she pointed me in the right direction. And that was 10 years ago.
Sounds, I mean, I gotta be honest though, it sounds cliche, especially if you've got a reference of God and you're a Christian maybe, and you've got that, it sounds like a patented kind of answer that, kind of just deflect almost, right? Like, you need to turn to Jesus. But at the same token, like, we cannot underestimate the transformative work that Jesus does in a life. And it's a miracle. And it's supernatural, and it actually does make a difference. And the fact of the matter is, we've all been in places, and we've been with people in places where, man, they're looking for it everywhere, and it's just not working.
Yeah.
And so how can we not?
It's funny. My wife, I had the privilege of leading my wife to Christ 7 years ago, and the two of us talk about this all the time. We actually just talked about it the other day. She said, "Why would anybody want to try and go through this life without God if they understand who he is, if they actually have any taste or sense of that he's there?" And it just seems almost ludicrous to us now. That said, you couldn't get me in a church for a wedding or a funeral for 20 years. And and my wife never knew anything about church or God or anything. I had that privilege of introducing her to that. But when I look at it now, there is just nothing that I have tasted in the world. And I mean, I've traveled, I've done a lot that will ever fill the void. And I talk about that in my book, but to me, the void is, we were made for something. And that something is really to be in relationship with God.
Yeah.
And when we don't have that, we can spend our lives trying to fill that void with stuff, things, family, relationships, friendships, substances. We literally are a society that's tremendously good at self-medicating to try and find a way to fill the void. But I mean, if there's anybody who's listening who hasn't taken God up on his offer to be in relationship with him, because he does promise in his word, like ask, seek, and knock, in Luke, right? Luke 11:16, I think. And it's such a tremendous life-changing experience. Like the peace and the joy and the contentment that Sarah and I live our life and our marriage with is we often sit in awe and shock and say, this is crazy. Like it just seems like people just want to try and do it their own way. And I mean, that's really the void that we've been trying to fill since the beginning of time is, I was listening to a sermon by a guy who I really like. And actually, I think it was another J.D. Greear sermon. And he said, I thought he put it so well. He said, picture the sun and the earth. And the sun is so much bigger than the earth with its gravitational pull and the warmth that it literally casts out into our solar system. And all the planets are in perfect harmony and orbit around the sun. And now let's just switch it. And let's put the earth at the center of our solar system and watch what happens. And it's chaos. Everything spins off into the universe. Life isn't sustainable. There's no warmth from it. And it was such a simple analogy to me to be able to say, like, we're the earth, right? And the sun is the main character. Yeah. And in our case, as humans, the sun is Jesus Christ. And our part to play is to take him up on his word and receive what he's willing to put forward so freely, and he's already done for us, right? Which is this remediation, and to fill that void when he says my burden is light and my yoke is easy. Like, I don't stress about work like I used to. Like, anybody who knows me knows I'm a workaholic. Like, if you want a guy who to be on your board or show up and put in 18 solid hours, like, I'm your guy. Like, I've rarely met anybody who works harder than me in my entire life, right? But I used to work because I was striving, because I didn't trust that it would work out.
Yeah.
And now I work because I love what I do, and I actually see how I can impact people's lives with the good news, the gospel of what Jesus Christ does in people's lives.
Yeah.
And, even my coworkers, like, to me, I see it as this amazing opportunity to do this amazing race, as Stephen Curtis Chapman puts it, where we're just really, we've got our 40 or 50. My dad was 43 years. I'm 44. 60, 70, maybe 85 years, as Moses says in Psalm 90, teach us to count our days, right?
Yeah.
It's so short. And yet we spend all of our time striving and somehow thinking that we're the main character.
Yeah, so good. So good. Just want to say welcome to Jason and Florence. Rob's here, and Dave, Brett. Good to see all of you guys. Pastor Danny. So good, Jonathan. Let's keep going. So 15, your dad has a horrific accident, drowns. It just traumatic for you. You take off, you head west. You say to God what a lot of people say, but you twist it at the end. A lot of people say, God, if you're real, show yourself to me. You say, God, if you're real, I want you to leave me alone.
Yeah.
You're hurting.
Yeah, it's
you're
funny.
broken.
I never doubted that God was there.
Yeah.
It's funny. I shared this in a small group with my pastor the other night. I said, I didn't doubt that God was there. I just didn't believe that he cared about me or my family.
Yeah.
And it seemed like everybody else was living this harmonious life, especially if they were Christians. And our family was sunk, torpedoed, and heading for the bottom. And so, it was hard to get my head around that.
So what happened? What happened after that? You're in the mountains. You're running. You're hurt,
really, the next critical point for me was I joined the Army. And looking back on it, I was either going to end up in jail, dead, or in a uniform. And Leonard Anderson and I talked about this at the Teen Challenge Sleep Out last year, because it was minus 27 and neither one of us were sleeping. So, really the discipline of doing phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 training. And I hate to say it, drinking a lot of beer on Friday nights gave me structure, and it gave me leadership training. And it was probably the first time I had, since my dad was alive, so we're talking 5 or 6 years, that I actually had structure, discipline, and had to answer to somebody. Yeah. And although it was, very much a secular environment, it was a structured environment, and I needed that.
Yep.
And then, like so many people who wander, I've got my tragedies, marriage and divorce, my kids, much to my regret, and something that, I just pray that the Lord will turn for the good, which I know he will, given time. They're growing up in a broken home. And I know that's because really I went my way. I was going to do it my way. And without getting into an entire dialogue on sowing and reaping, I was reaping what I was sowing, and it takes time. But I said to him, I want to go my own way. I want to do it my way. And so he let me do that. And I often think of it in the context of a father with his 4-year-old son, and the son has a little temper tantrum over something that really is quite trivial from the father's perspective. And off he goes into the backyard, down and across the grass, stomping and hollering to sit on his playground or his little play set, and he's crying and he's angry. And the father comes down and tries to remediate the situation, and the kid screams and loses it even more and rejects the father's love. And then finally the kid cools down and realizes he's kind of making a mess of things and might be a little better off to talk with the dad. And I feel like that was me at 33, 34. It just felt like the father came along and said, Jonathan, are you ready to to let me explain this to you, or at least give you a sense of my sovereignty, and that I do care for you and I do love you. And it was ironically at another very traumatic time in my life, as I was going through a divorce and just desperate to keep my family unit together and not see my kids grow up in a broken home. And at that point I was like, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore myself. Yeah.
Man, I love your honesty and your vulnerability, Jonathan. It's super refreshing. You know, sometimes in a world where, you know, sometimes Christians can paint a picture that, you know, everything's perfect and you come to faith in Jesus and life is easy, and it's just not true.
No, he promises that he will walk with you through the storm.
Right.
But there's going to be lots of storms. And, you know, now I don't know if it sounds cliche as you put it, but I understand what it means to have peace in the midst of the storm.
Yeah.
My life probably has more storms in it now than ever before. The only difference is I go and talk to my Father about it and say, hey, like, I don't know what to do with this employee. I don't know what to do with this business situation. I'm not sure what you would have me do here with this, or I've really disappointed my wife and I don't want to do that. I know that next to you, she's the second most important relationship in my life. So teach me to be a husband that you would have me be to her, right? And to lift her up and elevate her and encourage her in her walk. And so, you know, I realized I've got the creator of the universe willing to invest time in me just because he cares about me and he wants to have a relationship with me. And what he wants is for me to point others to him. And it just seems like such an easy transaction to say, okay, so you care about us so much so that you sent your son to die on the cross for us. And you want to be in relationship with us that much. And the only thing you're asking us to do is just acknowledge you and point people to you. Like, that just seems so easy, right? It almost seems like we're getting off easy.
Yeah.
when you consider just how broken we are, right? And how he meets us in that brokenness. Like, you know, I just remember reading, I know it sounds crazy, but I love Bill O'Reilly books. And I read Bill O'Reilly's Killing Jesus. And there was a part where he said he was either a fraud, he was crazy, or he was who he said he was. And I was like, I gotta dig into this. And when I did, I was like, okay, well, 500 people heard him preach after he rose. If we took 500 people into a court of law in Nova Scotia today or in Canada, and all 500 of them were willing to be stripped of their homes, their freedoms, their lives, but none of them would bend and say, no, like, we saw the guy, we heard him, he's alive, and we heard him preach. And then if all 12 of the disciples are willing to be die
so good
for what they witnessed, I'm like, okay, he couldn't have been crazy, it can't be fraud. So anybody who's actually got a rational mind and is willing to dig into this has to conclude that the guy was who he said he was. So then the problem that invokes, and this is what mankind struggles with, is, okay, well, now I have to respond to that.
Right.
Like, I can't just ignore that anymore if I've come to that conclusion.
Yeah.
And so that's when I got on my knees and said, I'm a sinner. Yeah. Like, I've gone my own way. I did it better than anybody. Like, I didn't just go my own way quietly. I waved my fist at you and said, I'm going my own way. Yeah. Right? You don't care about me. I'm not interested in you. Like, that was that 18-year-old kid that you knew in high school.
Sounds so much like the book of Psalms. And I love, you know, one of the Psalms says, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil because you are with me. That's the differentiating factor. We're all walking through valleys in this life, but the difference is I don't have to fear because you're with me. And I heard somebody say once, you know, if there's a shadow, that indicates there's light somewhere. And so we know
it's crazy. Like, it's like everybody in our society today, I mean, really, it's the idol of self. I mean, that's what we're worshiping, right? And everybody wants Jesus in a lamp, Jesus a la carte. I know a book that you really like was A Hole in Our Gospel. There's a passage in there where we talk about the church in the context of a spiritual spa. Oh, I didn't like what the pastor shared today. I did like J.D. Greer online. There's so much online. Oh, Leonard, I don't know what he was saying there, right? But the fact is we're supposed to glorify him,
Yeah.
right? Like, I even look at when he fed the 5,000, what did they want, right? They wanted to make him king. They wanted him to take out the Romans. Like, they wanted Jesus on their terms, and they liked the free food.
Yeah.
But the fact is that's not why he came, right? He came to glorify his Father who lives in heaven, right?
Yeah.
And
he
so
said,
I
if you've
was
seen
like,
me, you've seen the Father. So.
right. And I'm like, okay, if Jesus is here to glorify the Father, how arrogant is it of me to want to glorify me?
Yeah.
Right.
Jonathan,
So,
man, crazy story. So you joined the military.
yeah.
And then where did it take you? Because I know you're not in the military now.
No, at the time I was training in Gagetown. I was offered a deployment with Whiskey Battery to Yugoslavia, where the Canadian Armed Forces were engaged in UN peacekeeping, ironically preventing Muslims and Christians from slaughtering one another, because that's really what that conflict was about. Merrill Lynch, or we know them as Wood Gundy, CIBC Wood Gundy, was recruiting on the base, and I had aced all of my training. I always think of it like Richard Gere in Officer and a Gentleman. The sergeants would try and get me to wash out, but I literally had no place to go, as Richard Gere says in that movie. So washing out was not an option for me. I needed the paycheck and I needed a place to sleep. They recruited me, and I did a double major in finance and accounting at SMU. And so there I was, military training, offered captain's stripes, a deployment, 5 years, we'll pay your full ticket, or I can become an investment guy. And interestingly enough, after my dad died, my mom landed with a really good stockbroker who actually, to this day, is probably one of the greatest guys in our industry regionally that I ever met. And I've been in it for 20 years since. But in 1995, I job shadowed with Nick for a day at Acadia Securities, my mom's broker. And I saw how much he cared about his clients, and how important it was for him to protect their families and their best interests. And I saw the nobility of an industry that rarely shows that side of itself. And that really imprinted on me. So when I got recruited, I was like, you know what? I think I could do this. My dad didn't have good planning in place, classic entrepreneur, too busy, making hay to actually do anything to protect it, build the barn or anything. And so I got into the industry, and I didn't look back. I a couple of years after being in the industry, set up my own brokerage, which was now hard to believe that was 17 years ago. And then halfway through that, really became what I'll say is a born again, Bible-toting Jesus freak, as some of my coworkers would certainly tag me, who aren't believers. I was like, okay, I've done this now in a secular context, but really with a noble motive. But now I'm trying to figure out how to do it for Jesus, for God, and to point people to him. And that was a struggle. Like I really gravitated towards William Wilberforce's story in the late 1770s, when he was 23 years old and became a Christian, and he was one of the youngest parliamentarians in England. And God put a vision on him to take down slavery, which had been with us for all of human history up to that point. So it'd be like telling us today, actually, this wouldn't even be a good comparison, but take away all the cars, right? Or take away our technology. And so I was like, man, what do I do? Like, I don't know how to be a Christian financial planner. I don't know how to interpret God's word, or the 2,350 verses that are in the Bible about money. Like, I don't know anything about this. I know how to make money Wall Street style for my clients, and I know how to manage money Wall Street style. And so that was a pivotal point. I was 7 years into, or 10 years into my career, 7 years into having my own brokerage, and really was struggling with, well, God, do you want me to keep doing this? Like, surely you want me to go to Guatemala and run an orphanage, right? Like, that's what I'm supposed to do now that I've had this aha Jesus moment and sell everything. But it became really clear to me that that was not what he was calling me to do.
Hmm.
And much like William, on a much smaller scale, he hadn't made any mistakes. He had me right where he wanted me. And it was in the role that I was in with my company. If you look at the Canadian financial services landscape, it is absolutely dominated and controlled by a couple of big insurance companies and a few big banks. So there's really no room for the Christian message and biblical teaching around stewardship or what God says about money to go out into our society, right? There's a very small segment of Christian advisors that are prepared to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he gave me this tenacious, independent personality, and by no coincidence had put me in a place where he had given me a financial services firm that could say, hey, this is where I stand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, man, you've come a long way from high school, buddy.
Yeah.
Let me,
Yeah.
and I don't want to take a lot more of your time, Jonathan. I so appreciate you just sharing so honestly and openly. So a couple things, I've heard this statement recently and it stuck with me. If we win at work and we lose at home, we still lose. You grew up you went through some really tough stuff, grew up without a dad for some of those pivotal, those key years, formative years of your life. You've got two girls of your own now. What encouragement are you given, and how is your relationship with Jesus? How do you juggle it all, man? How do you make it all work? Like, you're an author, you're an entrepreneur, you are a advocate and a fundraiser for lots of different ministries and charities and great causes, and you're a high functioning producer. You get it done.
Yeah.
But when you strip all that away and you're in an industry that is, it's a tough one to navigate even as a Christian, finances and wealth. And, we live in a culture that is very, like you say, all about us, self-serving.
Yeah.
And yet we subscribe to a belief that it's better to give than to receive, generosity, all of that. How does your faith play into now, and your story play into raising your two daughters? And what's important to you if you boil it all down? What's important to Jonathan Lewis right now?
Yeah, so Sarah and I, we say this all the time, and we say it to the girls. And remember, these girls are growing up with two different homes and two different worldviews. So very respectfully, we say to them all the time, like, in this house, and you guys have, it's funny, I can see a blessing in anything. And, one of my daughters said to me years ago, like, I'm the only kid in my class who's in a divorced home, and that was gut-wrenching for me. And she was crying because the teacher had asked, what's the one thing that nobody in the class would know about you? And my daughter said, well, it really hurts me that I'm growing up in a broken home. And she shared this with my wife and I. And of course, as a father, like, just cut your guts out and spill them on the floor. Like what would you want to do to try and take away that hurt and pain from your daughter, right? And but I remember saying to her, you're also really lucky because divorce is now 63%. It's 2/3 of marriages. So it is a foregone conclusion that in our society it's going to be here. It is here. It's a part of daily life for most families, and the church, unfortunately, is, like many things, has not done a good job of identifying it and ministering to those broken situations. And if anything, often the church compounds it by making people feel inadequate. But for my daughter, I said, the blessing to you is you're getting two very different worldviews, and you get to decide what's going to really matter to you and what your worldview is going to be. And you get to really evaluate both of those worldviews and pick what matters to you. And then, of course, for my wife and I, we're very clear on the worldview we're trying to teach the girls. And that is in our home, it's God. our marriage, the kids, and then everything else.
Yeah.
So I can say with conviction, notwithstanding, I forgot to ask my wife about her day today when she got home, and she's watching right now.
Not over yet. Sarah, hang in there. It's not over yet. He's coming.
Most of the time, I'm really tuned in to Sarah. So I know that in order to feed others, in order to disciple others, I got to be feeding myself. So I spend a tremendous amount of time in the Word, and not out of duty or some pharisaical
box.
Yeah, no, honestly, I love God's Word, man. Like, when he says it is life, it is living, I would challenge anybody to put down the pre-digested narrative that we're getting from so many church leaders and just actually pick up the Word of God for themselves and read it. It is an amazing book that is consistent from cover to cover. Right. So I focus on that. I focus on my marriage. I pour into my kids every free second I get with them, discipling. If you ask my staff, in my calendar is pink. Pink is a non-negotiable. I don't answer my phone. I don't answer texts. I don't answer emails. I'm not working. If it's 2:30 on a Monday afternoon and it's in pink, it means I'm with my daughters or my wife or both. So you've got to prioritize. In my book I'm just finishing now, one of the first chapters is on the stewardship of time. And I think many Christians, many people don't think about their time as something finite. We can make more money. You can make mistakes with relationships, and God can still help you navigate and heal those relationships. But he only gives each one of us, regardless of how much money we have or how little, 168 hours. 50 to work, 50 to sleep, and 68 for everything else. So you got to get clear on what you have for time, and then you got to prioritize. Like even Jesus said, I'm going to prepare a place for you, and I'm sending, as we know, I'm paraphrasing as you did, the Holy Spirit. Well, it's because the Holy Spirit's everywhere. So I don't have to be everything to everybody. I don't have to be everywhere. I just have to be obedient as a steward of the time that he's given me, and he lays out in his word, like with that time. So there's nothing more important to me than my wife, my kids, then it's my employees, my clients, and the circles get broader from there. And it's not hard to manage your time when you're cognizant of it. And again, Psalm 90, man, help us to be, as Moses put it, and I'll paraphrase, but be cognizant of our time. Help us to number our days.
Be intentional. Right?
So it's I'm very, very purposeful. That's all. I feel guilty. I'll always say to my wife, I've had a long day. I've read some of the word. I listened to a sermon by Francis Chan. I'm feeling really good, but I need to decompress before I go to sleep. I'm just going to watch something on Amazon Prime or I'm going to watch this. And I even feel guilty for that because I'm like, Lord, am I being a bad steward of your time? Right? But then you got to give yourself a break too, right? So.
No, that's so good. That's so real. I love it. Jonathan, let's wrap this thing up. I want you to talk to, so many different people, different stages of life are going to come across this video either right now or on YouTube or on IGTV. You're 44. You've gone through some really challenging stuff in life. You've tried it on your own. You've wandered. You've done your own thing. You've lived for yourself. You met Jesus, and you've wrestled through the implications of that, and you've chosen to walk the narrow road. You've got your hands in a lot. You're still, you still have struggles and stress and busyness and lots to do. But what do you want to say tonight to somebody that might be just wrestling either with this whole God thing? Who is Jesus? Why does it matter? If he's real, how come my life looks like this? So that's one side of it. My life's a mess. And if there's a God, why isn't he helping me? Or, I'm living in a place where I do know Jesus and I'm a Christian, but man, it doesn't feel like the fulfilled life that Jesus promised to give us.
Yeah.
Any final encouragement with all of that in the mix, those two sides, those who
I
know
don't know if
Christ.
this will be I don't know if this will be encouraging or not, Mark, but it's the truth. And the truth sometimes stings. But I know for me, someone said from the pulpit once, probably 3 or 4 years ago, God isn't here to glorify you. You're here to glorify him. And when you say, well, I'm not feeling it, or I'm going through this hardship, and where's God in it? And where's Jesus? Like, that was me as a kid.
Yeah.
When I go through hardship now, the only thing I ask is, Lord, what is it you're trying to teach me? Because if we look at Job, God was trying to teach Job something, and it was about God's sovereignty, period.
Yeah.
With Joseph, he was trying to do something, and it was to glorify God through Joseph's hardships, and it was to save a nation. Right? If we look at Jonah wanted to go his own way, and he was playing God because he's like, no. Nineveh doesn't deserve your grace. So he was basically putting himself in a place of wisdom and authority. But in all three cases, and we could go on and on and on, it's all about God. It's all about going back to what we talked about earlier, the sun and the earth. Yeah. The sun is what keeps it all together. And although you might not understand what you're going through, and it might take 20 years, or frankly, it might not even be revealed in your lifetime, there is purpose in it. Yeah. Nothing happens under his watchful eye that doesn't have purpose. It's just really hard for us sometimes to get our head around it.
Yeah, our limited human perspective, for sure.
We're so limited. So, I would encourage you to say, okay, he's the same today as he was in the very beginning, right? And he's wrestled with mankind for thousands of years. We're not the first people to say, God, where are you? Are you there? Like David wrestled in, was it Psalm 89? He's like, God, are you there? Do you care? I don't understand where you are. The end, right? Like, we don't even get that closure that we normally get with the Psalm of David's, where he glorifies God. The whole psalm was just a big struggle of a venting session. Yeah. So, like, it's okay to doubt and to struggle. I mean, even when Jesus ascended into heaven, right? What does it say in, was it Matthew 28:17? That one little thing, it says a bunch of them worshiped and glorified Jesus as he rose into heaven, and then some doubted. They're like, well, wait a minute. Like, the Romans haven't been defunct. You're leaving us, but we don't know what we're supposed to do. Like it's crazy, but we always want him on our terms. Yeah. When in actual fact, here he is, the guy's rising up into heaven, and people are like, where's he going? Yeah. Right? I don't know. Yeah. I'm not so sure. Maybe he's not the Messiah. It's like the guy's floating off into heaven, man. So we're always gonna question. It's in our DNA and our nature. It's that flesh, that brokenness. It's that me, myself, and I sinful nature. So it's okay to wrestle with that, but you got to get on your knees and really say, okay, you are who you are. Like, you're never going to change. Like, what is it you're trying to teach me through this? Like, when I'm facing hardship now, I'm just saying, okay, Lord, I don't know why this person got on my skin today. I could just go right through the computer at them, right? You made me to have a deep sense of justice. You made me to be a challenger. Like my wife talks about all the time. I'm always ready for a good fight. Bring it on, right? And then the Lord saying, Jonathan, I'm chipping away at your character. This is this journey of sanctification. Like, you got to trust me for this. Like, there's something in this. Like, just put down your sword. Like he said to Peter in the garden when they were arresting him, like, Peter, And so, yeah, my parting advice would be, oh my goodness, stay in the race. Like, there's just, what's the alternative? Yeah. Right? Like when in John 6, when they say, a lot of the disciples fell away, they found the teaching so hard. And then finally Jesus says, Peter,
you're going to go too?
Where would we go? Yeah. Right? Peter said. So I don't want to just be at that point where it's like, where would I go? Or like Richard Gere, I got no place to go. Right? I'm like, okay, I've accepted that you are the creator of the universe, so let's go. Yeah. And if that means you got to beat me like Corrie Ten Boom or any of the other amazing people that we have the privilege of reading their biographies today, to shape me and glorify you, then so be it. Shape me and glorify you.
It's very good. Very good.
Yeah.
Jonathan Lewis, thank you so much. This has been refreshing to hear your story, and even challenging. Like you said, the truth sometimes hurts, but it's good. It's what we need, and we're seeking that. And Jesus is the way. He is the truth.
Yeah.
He is the life. And probably the most famous scripture, you'll see it at football games, you'll hear it in church, but for God so loved the world, right? It's the love of God that he sent his son, as a father. He sent his son, that whoever believes, they won't perish, but they'll have eternal life. That's the good news of the gospel. Hey, if you're watching and you're in a place where you've got questions, you're wrestling, maybe you're broken, maybe you've got some anger that you're dealing with, you've gone through some tough stuff like Jonathan talked about tonight. Maybe you're in a place where you're in the fight of your life. Maybe you're fighting suicidal thoughts, depression, whatever life is throwing at you. I want to remind you tonight, God loves you. He's got a plan for your life.
And Mark, I'll even say, if there's somebody that is in that state, private message me. Awesome. I've been there. There's been 2 points in my life, ironically, when I walked away from God and when I came back to God, where I was in those dark places. And I can even remember a pastor preaching about it. And I realized he didn't get it. When a person's at a point where they want to end their life, it's because the pain is so absolutely acute and no one can see it, and they just want the pain to stop. It's hopelessness, and Jesus is the exact opposite of that. He is hope. So
hope is found in Jesus.
Private message me, and I can be the guy that talks you out of the window and points you to him.
Awesome. Go ahead and do that. Connect with Jonathan right here on Instagram as well. If you want to go to peacewithgod.net, it's a website that we have as a ministry. There are people ready there to pray with you and to talk with you and encourage you. Peacewithgod.net. Check that out. Jonathan, last comments. You've got a book, Deepwater. How can people get their hands on it?
Amazon. You can get on Amazon. That's what it looks like.
Deepwater, perfect.
I pour my heart out in it, and my new book will be out in April. It's about stewardship, and not in the context that you think. It's not about money. It's about how we show up for him with everything we have. And I don't have a title for it. I'm thinking about calling it Jesus Loves a Risk Taker Too, but we'll see. But awesome. Amazon.
Stay tuned for that. Go to Amazon, look for Deepwater, Jonathan Lewis. Jonathan, it's been awesome, man. God bless you. We'll see you real soon. Take care, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
God bless you. Thanks, guys.